dark waters surrounding the Cape of Good Hope have claimed countless lives throughout the long centuries of maritime history. Sailors whisper fearful tales of a cursed vessel that patrols these treacherous waves during the fiercest and most unforgiving storms. It is a phantom ship that glows with a ghostly and unnatural red light against the pitch-black horizon. The terrifying legend of the Flying Dutchman has haunted the imagination of anxious mariners for hundreds of years. This spectral ship is doomed to sail the oceans forever without ever making port or finding true peace. Witnesses state that spotting this glowing apparition is a terrible omen of immediate disaster and death. The story begins in the golden age of exploration, when the seas were uncharted and dangerous. During the 17th century, the Dutch East India Company was the most powerful trading organization on the entire planet. Their massive ships carried spices and silks and porcelain between the Netherlands and the distant ports of Asia. It was a time of immense wealth, but also of incredible danger for the men who worked the sea. The route around the southern tip of Africa was particularly notorious for its violent weather and rocky coastline. Many sturdy vessels were smashed to pieces against the jagged cliffs of the Cape. It was in this unforgiving environment that a captain named Hendrick van der Decken made his name. He was a skilled seaman, but he was also known for his terrible temper and his lack of fear. Captain Hendrick van der Decken was a man who respected neither God nor the devil when he was behind the wheel of his ship. He was determined to make the fastest voyages possible between Amsterdam and the Dutch East Indies. In the year 1641, he was commanding a large merchant vessel on its return journey home to Holland. The ship was heavily laden with valuable cargo that would make the captain and his crew very rich men. They had enjoyed a prosperous voyage until they began to approach the treacherous waters of the Cape. The sky turned a bruised purple, and the wind began to howl like a wounded animal. The crew watched the horizon with growing dread as the storm clouds gathered. As the ship drew closer to the Cape of Good Hope, the weather deteriorated into a terrifying hurricane that battered the wooden hull. Massive waves crashed over the deck and threatened to sweep the terrified sailors into the churning abyss below. The prudent course of action would have been to turn back or seek shelter in a quiet bay until the storm passed. The crew pleaded with Captain van der Decken to change course and save their lives from the angry ocean. They feared that the ship would be torn apart by the sheer force of the wind and water. However, the captain stood firm on the quarterdeck and refused to yield to the elements. He was possessed by a manic determination. Van der Decken was not a man to be trifled with, and he laughed at the fears of his exhausted crew. He began to drink heavily and smoke his pipe while the storm raged around him with increasing violence. He screamed obscenities at the wind and challenged the very forces of nature to do their worst. The crew whispered among themselves that their captain had lost his mind or had been possessed by a dark spirit. They plotted mutiny in the shadows, but were too afraid of his wrath to take action. The captain swore a terrible oath that he would round the Cape of Good Hope, even if it took him until doomsday to do it. This blasphemous vow would seal his fate. The storm raged for days without ceasing, and the ship was pushed to the very brink of destruction. Sails were ripped to shreds, and the masts groaned under the immense pressure of the gale. The terrified sailors fell to their knees and prayed to God for salvation from the watery grave that awaited them. Decken mocked their prayers and struck the pious men who dared to show fear. He grabbed the wheel himself and steered the ship directly into the heart of the tempest. It was an act of supreme arrogance that defied the natural order of the world. Suddenly, a brilliant and blinding light appeared through the dark clouds and illuminated the heaving deck. From within the blinding light, a glowing figure descended onto the ship and confronted the crazed captain. Some legends say it was the Holy Spirit, while others claim it was an angel sent to punish the blasphemer. The entity asked Captain Decken if he did not intend to seek a safe harbor for the night. The captain drew his pistol and fired a shot directly at the divine messenger without hesitation. He shouted that he asked for no peaceful voyage and demanded only to sail on. The bullet passed harmlessly through the spirit and struck the mainmast. The glowing figure then pronounced a curse that would echo through history. The judgment was swift and eternal and terrifying. The voice of the entity boomed over the roar of the ocean and condemned Decken to his fate. The curse stated that he would never again see his home or his family or the solid earth. He was doomed to sail the oceans for all eternity with a crew of ghastly skeletons. The ship would never make port and would always be tormented by an endless storm. Furthermore, the vessel would bring death to all those who laid eyes upon it. The captain and his ship were destined to become the Flying Dutchman and wander the seas forever. As the curse was spoken, the mortal crew vanished, and the ship began to glow with a hellish red light. The physical body of Captain Decken withered away, but his spirit remained bound to the wheel. The once majestic merchant vessel was transformed into a rotting hulk that could never sink. The sails turned into tattered rags that were forever filled with a phantom wind. The legend says that the devil himself now guides the ship through the worst, whether the ocean can produce. For centuries, since that fateful night, sailors have reported seeing a glowing ship near the Cape. It appears during storms when the waves are high and the danger is greatest. The sighting of the Flying Dutchman became the most feared event in the life of any mariner. One of the earliest recorded sightings of the phantom ship occurred in the early 19th century. In 1823, the crew of the Royal Navy ship His Majesty's ship, Levin spotted the vessel. They reported seeing a ship approach them through the mist, but it vanished when they tried to hail it. The sailors on the Levin were deeply unsettled by the encounter and feared for the safety of their voyage. The logbooks from this era are filled with nervous entries about strange lights and phantom vessels near the southern tip of Africa. It seemed that the curse of Van der Decken was not merely a story, but a tangible reality. The ocean kept its secrets well. Another chilling encounter took place in 1835, involving a British ship off the coast of South Africa. The captain and crew saw a vessel sailing directly toward them under full sail, despite a severe storm. They braced for collision as the mysterious ship closed the distance at an impossible speed. Just moments before the two ships would have crashed, the stranger vanished into thin air. The British crew was left shaking and terrified by the inexplicable event they had just witnessed. They described the phantom ship as having a strange red glow that illuminated the dark water. This description matched the legend of the Flying Dutchman perfectly and spread fear through the fleet. The most famous and well-documented sighting occurred later in the 19th century, involving royalty. In July of 1881, the young Prince George of Wales was serving as a midshipman. He was aboard His Majesty's ship Bacchante, which was sailing off the coast of Australia near Melbourne. The prince, who would later become King George V, kept a detailed diary of his travels. In the early hours of the morning, a lookout reported seeing a strange red light on the horizon. The officer of the watch and several cadets were called to the bridge to observe the phenomenon. What they saw would be recorded in history books forever. Prince George wrote in his diary that the Flying Dutchman crossed their bows at 4 in the morning. He described it as a strange red light, as of a phantom ship all aglow. The ship appeared to be fully rigged, with masts and spars standing out clearly against the light. There were 13 people in total who witnessed the spectral vessel as it sailed past the Bacchante. The night was clear, and the sea was calm, which made the apparition even more unsettling. Unlike the stormy sightings of the past, this encounter happened in relatively peaceful waters. However, the sense of dread that accompanied the ship was just as potent. The phantom ship was not alone for long, as 2 other vessels in the squadron also reported seeing the light. The Tourmalin and the Cleopatra signaled that they too had observed the strange red glow. The witnesses watched as the spectral ship moved silently across the water and then simply disappeared. There was no physical trace of the vessel left behind on the surface of the ocean. The sudden appearance and disappearance defied all logical explanation and left the crew in a state of high anxiety. They knew the legends well, and they knew that seeing the Dutchman was a harbinger of doom. They waited fearfully for the curse to strike. The aftermath of the sighting on the Bacchante was swift and tragic, as the superstition predicted. Later that very same morning, the ordinary seaman who had first spotted the phantom ship met his end. He fell from the crosstrees of the topmast and was smashed to death on the deck below. The crew was horrified by the accident and saw it as immediate confirmation of the curse. The prince noted the tragedy in his diary with a somber tone that reflected the mood of the ship. Even a future king was not immune to the chilling power of the Flying Dutchman legend. The death of the lookout cemented the story in naval history. The legend of the Flying Dutchman continued to persist well into the 20th century. Keepers at the Cape Point Lighthouse have reported seeing a phantom ship on numerous occasions during storms. They describe an old-fashioned sailing vessel struggling against the wind in the darkness. When they try to focus their telescopes on the ship, it often vanishes into the mist. These men are trained observers who know the waters better than anyone else on Earth. Their testimonies add a layer of credibility to a story that might otherwise be dismissed as folklore. The location of these sightings is always consistent with the original legend of Van der Decken. In 1939, a group of people on Glencairn Beach in South Africa witnessed a strange event. They saw a ship under full sail moving through the water on a calm and sunny day. The ship appeared to be from a different era, with a design that had not been used for centuries. As the witnesses watched in amazement, the ship slowly dissolved into a mist and disappeared completely. The detailed reports from multiple independent witnesses made this sighting particularly compelling to researchers. It suggested that the Flying Dutchman was not limited to stormy nights or the open ocean. The phantom could appear even in the bright light of day. During the Second World War, the crews of German submarines prowling the Cape also reported strange sightings. These men were operating strictly logical and mechanical war machines, yet they saw the impossible. Submarine commanders noted in their logs the appearance of an ancient sailing ship that did not register on sonar. The silent vessel would appear on the surface and then vanish before they could engage or investigate. For men living in the claustrophobic tension of a U-boat, these encounters were psychologically devastating. It was a reminder that there were forces in the ocean far older and stronger than their technology. The war could not stop the curse. The psychological impact of the Flying Dutchman legend on sailors cannot be overstated. For centuries, the ocean was a lonely and dangerous place where death was always present. Stories of the phantom ship gave a face and a name to the formless fears of the deep. It became a symbol of the ultimate punishment for arrogance and the violation of natural laws. Sailors would avoid looking at the horizon during storms for fear of seeing the glowing red sails. To see the Dutchman was to know that your own death was likely imminent. This shared belief created a powerful atmosphere of dread on many voyages. Skeptics have tried to explain the phenomenon of the Flying Dutchman using science and meteorology. The most common explanation is a superior mirage known as fata morgana. This optical illusion occurs when light bends through layers of air with different temperatures. It can make a ship that is far beyond the horizon appear to be floating in the air nearby. The distorted image can look like a ghostly or flying vessel to the untrained eye. This scientific theory explains why the ship often disappears or changes shape suddenly. However, it does not account for the specific details reported by witnesses. While Fata Morgana can explain some sightings, it fails to address the glowing red light described by Prince George. Optical illusions do not typically generate their own light or appear in the dead of night. The consistency of the descriptions over hundreds of years suggests something more than just atmospheric tricks. Witnesses from different centuries and different nations have described the same vessel with the same details. The rotting hull and the tattered sails and the eerie silence are constant elements of the story. Science can explain the how of an illusion, but it cannot explain the why of the myth. The cultural influence of the Flying Dutchman has spread far beyond the superstitious world of sailors. The story was immortalized by Richard Wagner in his famous opera, Der Fliegende Holländer. Wagner added the romantic element of redemption through love, which was not part of the original dark legend. In the opera, the captain is allowed to go ashore once every 7 years to find a faithful wife. If he finds a woman who will love him until death, the curse will finally be broken. This version of the story transformed the captain from a villain into a tragic figure. It added a layer of sorrow to the horror. Despite the romantic interpretations, the original legend remains a story of horror and eternal damnation. The core of the tale is the terrifying concept of a voyage that never ends. To be trapped on a rotting ship with a crew of the dead is a hellish fate. The Flying Dutchman represents the fear of being lost forever and unable to return home. It taps into the primal human need for rest and closure and a final resting place. Van der Decken is denied the peace of the grave and must suffer his punishment publicly. He is a warning to all who would dare to challenge the divine. There are chilling tales that the crew of the Flying Dutchman tries to communicate with passing ships. Sailors have reported seeing a small boat lowered from the phantom ship during calm weather. The skeletal crew rows toward the living vessel, holding out a packet of letters. These letters are addressed to people in Holland who have been dead for centuries. The legend warns that accepting these letters will bring doom to the ship that takes them. Wise captains would order their crews to sail away immediately and ignore the pleas of the dead. Contact with the cursed ship is always fatal. The image of the skeleton crew working the rigging is one of the most disturbing aspects of the legend. These undead sailors are bound to their captain and his curse and cannot leave the ship. They perform the tasks of sailing without purpose, as the ship never reaches a destination. Their movements are jerky and unnatural as they haul on rotting ropes and climb unparalleled masts. The silence of their labor is broken only by the creaking of the ship and the captain's shouting. They are prisoners of the sea and slaves to a blasphemous oath made centuries ago. Their suffering is as eternal as the voyage itself. The Flying Dutchman is often described as sailing against the wind, which is physically impossible for a sailing ship, while other vessels are battling a gale, blowing in one direction. The Dutchman sails effortlessly into it. This supernatural ability is a clear sign that the ship is not of this world. It moves with a speed that defies the laws of physics and the capabilities of 17th century design. The wind that fills its sails is a phantom wind that blows from hell itself. This eerie movement is often the first clue to sailors that they are not looking at a normal ship. Modern mariners still treat the waters around the Cape of Good Hope with a great deal of respect. The ocean there is known as the graveyard of ships for good reason. The skeletons of hundreds of wrecks litter the ocean floor beneath the churning waves. While technology has made shipping safer, the sea remains a wild and unpredictable force. The legend of the Flying Dutchman serves as a reminder of the dangers that still exist. Even on a modern radar-equipped vessel, a sudden storm can bring disaster. The ghost of Van der Decken is never far from the minds of the locals. Some researchers believe that the story of the Flying Dutchman is a composite of several real events. There were indeed captains who went mad and ships that vanished without a trace in the 1600s. The isolation and hardship of long sea voyages often drove men to the brink of insanity. A captain refusing to turn back during a storm was a very real scenario that crews feared. The supernatural elements were likely added over time as the stories were told in taverns. However, the root of the legend lies in the very real trauma of maritime history. It is a story born from the blood and tears of sailors. The visual description of the ship has remained remarkably consistent in art and literature and reports. It is always a Dutch vessel from the East India Company era, with a high stern and distinctive shape. The wood is blackened by age, and the elements and the sails are often red or glowing. This consistency helps to reinforce the reality of the legend in the minds of the public. When people imagine a ghost ship, they are almost always imagining the Flying Dutchman. It has become the archetype for all nautical horror stories. The image is burned into our collective consciousness. The horror of the Flying Dutchman is not just in its appearance, but in its purpose. It acts as a magnet for storms and disaster and suffering. Where the Dutchman sails, the sea boils, and the winds scream, and the sky turns black. It brings the storm with it, wherever it goes, trapping other ships in its wake. Encounters often result in the witnessing ship losing its way or running aground or sinking. It is a contagion of bad luck that spreads to anyone who comes too close. To see the ship is to be touched by the curse yourself. There is a profound sadness in the figure of Captain Van der Decken that rivals his wickedness. He is a man who was too proud to admit defeat and too stubborn to accept his limits. His punishment is an ironic reflection of his crime, as he got exactly what he demanded. He wanted to sail around the Cape forever, and now he must do so without end. He is the ultimate prisoner of his own ego and his own words. The tragedy is that he drags his innocent crew along with him into damnation. They suffer for the sins of their leader. In recent years, the sightings of the Flying Dutchman have become less frequent, but have not stopped completely. The rise of automated shipping and air travel has reduced the number of eyes on the ocean surface. However, occasionally, a private yachtsman or a fishing crew will report something strange. They speak of a glow on the horizon or a ship that disappears from radar screens. These modern reports are often dismissed or ridiculed, but the witnesses remain shaken. The ocean is vast and empty, and there are still places where the old mysteries survive. The Dutchman waits in the blind spots of the world. The enduring power of the Flying Dutchman legend lies in its connection to the unknown. The sea covers most of our planet, yet much of it remains unexplored and misunderstood. It is a place where human rules do not apply, and where ancient fears are justified. The phantom ship is a manifestation of the terror we feel when facing the infinite void of the ocean. It represents the boundary between the living world and the world of the dead. As long as humans sail the seas, the legend will continue to hold power. We need monsters to explain the darkness. Legends say that the curse can only be broken on the day of judgment, when the world ends. Until then, the ship must continue its weary patrol around the southern tip of Africa. The captain stands at the wheel with eyes that have seen centuries of storms and suffering. He scans the horizon for a salvation that will never come, and a port he can never enter. The red light of his lantern cuts through the fog as a warning to the living. He is the eternal exile of the ocean. He is the Flying Dutchman. The next time you find yourself looking out over a stormy ocean at night, remember this story. If you see a strange red light bobbing on the waves in the distance, do not look too closely. It might just be a navigation buoy or the light of a distant fishing boat, but it could also be the glowing lanterns of the Flying Dutchman searching for a witness. To see it is to invite the attention of a curse that has lasted for nearly 400 years. Turn your eyes away and pray for a safe journey home. Some mysteries are best left drifting in the dark. The ocean keeps its dead, and it keeps its secrets deep beneath the cold, rolling waves. The Flying Dutchman is more than just a ghost story to those who make their living on the sea. It is a reminder of the thin line between life and death and the power of nature. The story of Hendrick van der Decken serves as a warning against arrogance and blasphemy. It teaches us to respect the forces that are greater than ourselves. As the wind howls and the waves crash, the phantom ship sails on. The voyage is eternal and the horror never ends. As we conclude this dark tale, the image of the rotting ship remains etched in our minds. We can almost hear the creaking of the timber and the shouting of the mad captain. We can feel the cold spray of the phantom ocean and see the glow of the red sails. The Flying Dutchman is a story that refuses to die, much like the captain himself. It sails through our nightmares, just as it sails through the storms of the Cape. It is the ultimate ghost story of the seven seas. The phantom ship waits for the next storm. The final thought that lingers is the possibility that the ship is still out there right now, somewhere in the vast darkness of the Southern Ocean. The Flying Dutchman is fighting the gale. The crew of skeletons is manning the yards, and the captain is gripping the wheel. They are trapped in a moment of time that stretches out into infinity. They are sailing nowhere and everywhere all at once, in a loop of despair. The storm never breaks for them, and the sun never rises. They are the eternal prisoners of the deep. And if you ever sail around the Cape of Good Hope, keep a close watch on the horizon. Listen carefully to the wind for the sound of ancient curses and rattling bones. You may think you are safe in the modern world, but the ocean is timeless. The Flying Dutchman cares nothing for your technology or your skepticism. It only knows the storm and the curse and the endless voyage. The red light is out there waiting in the dark. Sleep well and do not dream of the sea. The legend of the Flying Dutchman is a testament to the power of storytelling and human fear. It connects us to the sailors of the past who faced the unknown with wooden ships and canvas sails. It reminds us that there are some fates worse than death. The eternal voyage is a punishment that chills the soul. As the fog rolls in and the night consumes the sea, the phantom ship continues its journey. It is a voyage without a destination and without an end. The Dutchman sails forever. So when the thunder rolls and the lightning strikes, remember the name Hendrick van der Decken. Remember the man who challenged God and lost everything for his pride. His story is a beacon of warning that shines across the centuries. The sea is a cruel mistress who demands respect from all who travel her waters. Those who disrespect her laws may find themselves sailing alongside the Dutchman. The phantom ship is always recruiting for its crew of the damned. Beware the red light in the storm. The eternal voyage continues tonight just as it has for hundreds of years. The waves rise and fall, and the wind screams its mournful song. In the heart of the tempest, the Flying Dutchman pushes forward against the gale. It is a lonely and terrifying existence that defies comprehension. The phantom ship is the dark shadow of maritime history that will never fade. It is the ghost that will never be laid to rest. The legend lives on. Ultimately, the Flying Dutchman is a mirror reflecting our deepest existential fears. It embodies the dread of being forgotten and the terror of endless suffering. It is the story of a man who cannot die and cannot live. It is the nightmare of isolation made manifest on the high seas. As long as the wind blows and the tides turn, the story will be told. The phantom ship sails on through the darkness of our collective imagination, and it will sail forever.